When you've got questions, he always has an answer. It's Sean Hannity this afternoon at 2, right before Joe Walsh at 5 on AM 560. The Answer.
Morning, Dan and Amy. Well, we reported earlier this week, Teen Vogue. That outlet is gone. Apparently, there wasn't as much of a marketplace to market the do's and don'ts of sodomy to teenage girls as Teen Vogue thought. Not kidding. That's what they did, among other
things.
Yeah. So the sexualization of children. That's something apparently to be celebrated in certain quarters, although, as I said, maybe not as many quarters as the cultural Marxists would like to believe, per Teen Vogue's economic fate. On the other side, this is a program that I think, an approach that parents like, but I think they're afraid to speak up and support it. This is one of the arguments that Charles Murray makes in his book about the changing social mores around family, that successful people don't preach what they practice. In other words, they don't preach intact two-parent family, teaching their children to be responsible sexually, and to do things like get married before you have children. Crazy things like that. Crazy things. The things that if you do, you have a 99% chance of never living in poverty. Getting a high school diploma, not committing a crime,
Okay.
And having children after you get married. If you can manage those three, is that too much to ask for civil society, for our expectations for young people, in terms of a virtual guarantee that they will be independent adults that can pursue success in their own terms? Well, consistent with that is a project here in Illinois, the Abstinence and Marriage Education Partnership. And they're launching a program in Illinois to teach, as the subject suggests, the name of the organization suggests, abstinence and marriage and the importance of family and responsible decision-making for young people. And to explain what that program is in more detail, we're pleased to be joined by Scott Phelps, who's the executive director at the Abstinence and Marriage Education Partnership. Scott, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Hey, Dan and Amy, thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
So,
wait, I just want to say I'm really glad I'm coming on after Sean from Elmwood Park, by the way.
Oh, okay. He'll sum up what you say later,
right.
so you're on notice.
Yes. So, what about the program? How is your organization seeking to provide the sort of education to young people that they're otherwise not inclined to receive, particularly in the public schools, but not limited to the public schools anymore?
Yeah, no, you summed it up beautifully with the lead in, Dan, and that is, we're just passionate that kids today would at least have the opportunity to learn about the benefits of marriage and family. That's all. And so what we want to do is go in and help young people understand that, hey, listen, if you simply can reserve sexual activity and childbearing for marriage, you're going to do a whole lot better than you're going to do otherwise. And so we think that's just a critical message. And our mission statement, Dan and Amy, is that every single teenager in the United States would have the opportunity, keyword, opportunity, to hear a clearly reasoned, positive presentation on the benefits of abstinence into marriage and instruction on preparing for a healthy future marriage. Believe it or not, that's not a message that they're getting. And we think they ought to get it and have the opportunity to consider that.
Well, should it be part of a school's curriculum? I mean, I took marriage and family, and we had somebody come and talk about abstinence, and I thought that was wonderful.
Yeah, no, thank you. But it's more than that, though. I think that's great, Amy, but it's more than that. It's that we believe that this should be a foundational message rather than what it typically is, we have a speaker come in to say something about that. We think this should be the primary emphasis, and we're actually seeking to reinstitutionalize as a foundational message that waiting until marriage is the safest, healthiest, best choice for you. It's interesting to me, listening to your previous discussion on the transgender issue, how much of that is actually coming through our schools. And see, sex education programs have really been sowing the seeds of this for years. Planned Parenthood, that is the largest provider of abortions in America, is also the largest provider of sex education programs, and it's filled with all that kind of sexual dysfunction.
Scott,
that's the primary message in our schools.
Scott, this isn't 18th century America anymore. Kids are going to do it anyway. We need to make sure it's safe. We just need to give them condoms and teach them to be responsible in that way with behavior they're going to do anyway, and stop with all of this tilting at windmills like kids are going to choose abstinence and exercise restraint.
Yeah, and that's the groupthink that we're constantly coming up against. Of course, the problem with that is the facts. And the facts are completely contrary to what the groupthink is, right? So that, for example, according to the CDC, 70% of high school students in America are not sexually active. So the idea that they're all going to do it anyway simply isn't factually true. And we just believe that it's really, really critical to give these kids a message, A, to encourage them on the path that they're already on, and then to help them understand how staying on that path is going to benefit them in a number of ways. I think it's really critical. You know, one of our partners working with us is a former principal in the Chicago Public Schools. He was there for 40 years teaching kids and being a principal. He says it this way. He says, Scott, in my 40 years in teaching the Chicago Public Schools, most of the kids we talk to say, no one has ever talked to us or encouraged us to save sex for marriage. It's not a message that kids are getting. And so what animates us, what drives us, is the passion that we think that kids should at least get to hear about why waiting until marriage matters and how it can be helpful for them. And listen, the kids eat it up. The problem isn't the kids. The problem is the smart people. The problem is the people who are too sophisticated to give kids very basic information. And what's really sad and kind of crazy to think about is all that sexual dysfunction that you were talking about on the previous segment. That has become, in many ways, the primary messaging of sex education in our schools. And think about this. Saving sex till marriage, what was always a social norm up until the time of the sexual revolution, is now the alternative. We're the alternative message. Like Amy said, some strange person will come in and talk to us about it.
Yeah, you're the rebel. That's it should you got to try and make it cool. Well, so what about this though? I mean, the context of your practicum. I mean, what are we hearing from Hollywood and all those people, in most cases rightly wringing their hands over what we've discovered about so many of the leading lights of Hollywood? What about what we're hearing coming out of state houses, including our own here in Illinois, in major media outlets? Isn't this about not objectifying women? Isn't that with the feminist message? We don't objectify women. We don't just treat them as sexual objects. Isn't that what we're hearing about those who would otherwise want to combat the culture of harassment where it exists? And so doesn't that comport with your message?
Yeah, well, and there's so many contradictory messages out there. And so what we're really wanting to do is give kids a sense of context for all these sexual messages. Kids are just inundated with sexual messages and imagery everywhere. TV, internet, phone, school, everywhere. And what we want to do is really provide a ballast for them. We want to help them have a context to understand that sex isn't a bad thing. Our message isn't sex is bad, don't have sex. We're not saying that. We're saying sex is a beautiful thing. It's a wonderful thing. In the context of a marriage relationship where it's safe and protected, it can be fantastic. But you don't even understand that because no one's ever even talked to you about that. You know what a girl said at Taft High School years ago when we did a presentation? I've never forgotten it. She wrote it down on her evaluation form. She said this. She said, I think saving sex for marriage is a great idea. I never thought of that before. That's what I want to do. Ding, 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 ding. This girl represents a generation of kids who haven't rejected the abstinence message. They've never heard it. It's like we just landed from Mars, and they're like, wait, what? Could you say that again? See, kids are very responsive to this because it rings true to them, and they're like, so this is the message I've been waiting to hear all my life. It's fantastic.
Wow. So do you think that, society, that we're doing a poor job, like we're promoting homosexuality, we're promoting transgender, because now that's the new thing, because no one even knew what a transgender person was until Caitlyn Jenner came along, really.
Wow.
No, I
Renee
did.
Richards.
Well, but I'm saying the younger generation.
Well, and don't you think that it's real when you say we're promoting, it's really, this media complex culture that takes these very, very rare and incidental situations and blows them into the media air and fans them and makes them larger than life. Mm-hmm. And so they take these very obscure situations and blow it out there like it's somehow the norm, when nothing could be further from the truth. Like I said, for example, 70% of kids aren't even sexually active, but you wouldn't know that from the media. You would get the idea that, oh, my goodness, all kids are having sex. There's nothing that we can do, throw contraception at them and cross our fingers, when that's just so far from the reality.
Well, I'll tell you, too, I just want to go back to something you said, too, about the adults who don't preach what they practice, the smart people, as you said, in quotation marks, the sophisticates, in quotation marks, and, where the peer pressure is coming from exactly. It seems to me that there's arguments maybe there's more peer pressure coming from adults to kids than kids within their own social circles. And I just recall, and I know you're going to be familiar with the story too, Scott, Erica Harold, who's a Republican candidate for Attorney General in Illinois this cycle, and former Miss America, Harvard law grad. Her platform when she won the Miss America contest was abstinence education. And after she won, and after people realized what her platform was for kids in school, of course, she was pilloried from all those cultural institutions that want to celebrate, as you were, celebrate transgenderism and try and undermine the family and introduce government between parents and kids and all that. So, but it's sort of an important thing to point out, and I just wonder if that's an angle of incidence with the kids. It's almost like, the adults don't have everything right. When you guys are talking amongst yourselves and you think that this makes sense for you, don't doubt yourself about that.
Yep. No, you're absolutely right. And too many, and this is an encouragement to parents, any parents that are listening, they should be aware that kids are much more receptive to this message than you would think from listening to the media. You're absolutely right.
So where do you go from here? How do we get the message across? What's next?
Okay, so for example, 3 trends that really animate our work, and that is, number one, the non-marital birth rate's at an all-time high. 40% of American children born outside the context of marriage, 72% in the black community, 3/4 of black kids born outside the family. That's a concern to us, number one. Number two, marriage rate's at an all-time recorded low. For the first time in our history, the marriage rate is below 50%. Most Americans are now not married, never been that before. And the third is the declining fertility rate, which is at an all-time low. So those are the 3 things that really drive us. Now, when I do training seminars, workshops, I'm heading out to South Carolina this afternoon for one tomorrow. And when I do these workshops, I put these graphs up on the PowerPoint, and I show the trend. And I say to the people, now, can these trends change? And people say, yes. And I'm like, how? Like, I don't think so. I don't think you change these trends unless the adults in the room get serious and have a systematic effort to work through schools and churches and equip parents across the nation to help a new generation of young people have an appreciation for the beauty of marriage and family. That's what our organization is all about.
And the organization is the Abstinence and Marriage Education Partnership, ampartnership.org. For more information about Scott's organization, Scott Phelps, the executive director. Scott, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
You guys are great. Thank you. Talk to you. Bye.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
You've made the switch